if you just make small little edits once a week, once a month, like allow those edits, or I like to call them upgrades, like just make little upgrades, like little edits and upgrades over time are really going to serve you and support you.
Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Chrissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Pfeiffer, back this week again with an amazing suburban warrior here to share her story and expertise with us. And I am really excited about today's topic and expert because I don't know about you guys, but I know lately I have really been trying to be very conscious about what I'm putting in my body, what it is that I'm eating, and making sure I'm making the healthiest choices possible, not only for myself, but for my family. And some days I'm just really frustrated by that journey because it feels like a never ending winning battle, not winning. So I am excited to welcome Chef Whitney Aronoff, a health supportive personal coach based in Laguna Beach, California, and founder of Starseed Kitchen and High Vibration Foods. Whitney healed herself with food by attending culinary school at the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York City. By studying Eastern and Western philosophies of healing with food, she uncovered the root causes of her suffering and healed herself of an autoimmune disease and chronic digestive issues. Whitney firmly believes that the healthiest meal one can eat is the one prepared at home. With experience in farm-to-table restaurants, meal prep delivery services, and personal chef services, she is dedicated to sharing her culinary knowledge to empower people to cook nourishing meals in their own kitchens. Welcome to the podcast, Whitney.
Thank you. I'm so excited to chat food and health and wellness and listening to your gut today.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Me too. So let's jump right in because I am really interested in hearing about your health journey and how you were able to heal yourself of both autoimmune diseases and chronic gut issues, which, let's be honest, I feel like everywhere you turn, people are experiencing these things, this day and age. And I don't think they're getting the support that they need from the medical community, unfortunately. So let's talk about how you were able to sort of heal yourself from those.
Yeah. And I don't think they ever will. I think everyone has to start taking personal responsibility of their health. So what I discovered along my journey is it was physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental. So there was never going to be one doctor to fix my issue. Was never going to be a nutritionist that could fix my issues because it was so deeply layered. So it took time, but it was resolved. And so one, it was what I was eating, right? So at the time when my gut issue started, I was in high school, it was the 90s, and we were told healthy food was essentially processed food, right? So fat-free food, diet label food, it was food that was in a package. So we weren't understanding that, baking a whole roast chicken and having all different parts of the animal, the dark meat, the light meat, steamed and roasted vegetables with just olive oil, salt, and pepper, like understanding that potatoes and sweet potatoes and root vegetables are great healthy starches. We weren't eating like that in the 90s. We were eating packaged rice with flavor packets that you add in. We were eating snack wells. We were eating, sugar-free frozen yogurt. Like the food was so processed. So I believe that had a lot to do with my gut issues. But then when we are all going through different challenges in our life and we are holding our emotions in so we can continue to be nice, polite, and the good girl, that is going to cause you to develop gut issues. And then layer that on top of the fact that we're all multidimensional spiritual beings. So this probably isn't our first life experience, probably not our first rodeo. So we're also carrying with us, whether we want to recognize it or not, past lives or something related to our family lineage that we're
Yeah.
also carrying. So it's so layered. And as you improve your diet and you start eating real whole foods, and when I say this, I mean, it's really that simple, guys. Like if you go to the grocery store and the ingredient is asparagus, the ingredient is an organic russet tomato, like that is healthy whole foods. Put like 100% grass finished butter on top, really good quality sea salt. That's good for you. When we start to eat real foods again, it naturally helps us shed layers, shed emotional layers, shed mental layers. It helps us better hear our higher self, our gut, trust our intuition. And then we can unlock these things ourselves, or at least know the next path we need to take to find the practitioner that's going to clear that next layer for us. So it's a layered process. It's a self-discovery process, but all of us get to be free of any physical, emotional, spiritual, mental pain. That's not what we're here to do. That doesn't necessarily help us have a better life learning experience. So I really would like people to start approaching nutrition as a tool to lay a good foundation for their body and their mental health. So then they can go out and live the life that's really that's going to, fill up their cup and bring lots of joy.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I'm just laughing to myself going back to what you were saying about the 90s, because I mean, what we were told then about fat free and sugar free. I mean, I would eat a whole box of snack wells and think
Me
that I was
too.
and I was doing good for myself. I'm like, well, they're fat free. But again, that was a time where that was the message, right? That was the marketing message that we were being sold. And I look back, now, and I think about all of that crap that I ate, and I get so mad. But like, I didn't know any better. So, and it was just, I guess, what we were all doing, back then. So I love that you sort of brought that up and brought on that whole like generational thing, because I think so many, I know, especially women in mid-age right now that are about, my age, they've all experienced that and we've all lived through that. And for myself, it took time to really start to learn what was good food. And it's really only been in the last, probably like, I would say, 8 years or so that as sad as that is, even bringing my kids up, I was still getting food out of the jar for them and stuff, because that's what I knew, and that's what was available. No one had a Vitamix when I had babies. You know what I mean? No one was really making their own food. I know a lot of people do that now. It just wasn't available. So I love that you brought that up. And I love that you also brought up that it's a holistic thing, right? It's not like we can just change our diet and then everything changes. It's looking at ourselves as a whole person. And, even spiritually, like when you brought up generational trauma, that's something that I even learned about in the last 5 years, that how like we can literally store in our bodies generational trauma could be from our grandmother, from our great grandmother, that we don't even know about. It's fascinating. So I love that you have that holistic approach to nutrition and to what you do. So, okay. So you were sick and you started to realize it's a whole picture. Food is a huge, huge part of it. So then what did you decide to do?
So I really, after 10 years of going to so many different doctors, spending so much money, going into debt and not getting any answers, I just decided, you know what? I know how I'm feeling in my body and I know there's a solution. So I just wanted to heal myself. So I decided to go to a culinary school that taught just as many classes in a kitchen as it did in a classroom with nutritionists. I wanted to learn how to make healthy food from scratch. I wanted to learn about the traditional preparation of food. And that changed my life, because a lot of our digestive issues are simply we don't know the traditional way we're supposed to prepare things because we've been taught how to save time. We've been taught
Yeah.
to be super efficient. And food's not necessarily supposed to be that way. And that's why you look back at history. And I always like to look at history to better understand food. That's why people had cooks. That's why, someone in the family stayed home and cooked all day because a
Yeah.
lot of this food takes many hours overnight, multiple days to be prepared. So, for instance, one of the simple things that most people aren't aware of is rice and quinoa need to be washed, and ideally you're soaking that rice overnight. Those simple steps are going to help you feel better when you eat it instead of following the mainstream right now that's telling you, oh no, grains are bad. All grains are bad. You can't digest them. They're going to make you fat. They have this, that, and the other that's going to make you sick. And that's not true. You just need to buy a higher quality one that was grown with good water in good soil, and you need to wash it and prepare it properly.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that because my Italian grandmother, they had a farm. So my grandfather was always out on the farm farming, and she was in the kitchen all day. And I remember going over there with my mom and just thinking to myself as a little girl, like, wow, she just cooks all day long. But because every single meal was from scratch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, that's what she did. But to your point, that is how it used to be. It's not like that anymore. We live in a microwave world. Pick up the food at Whole Foods. And that's the thing, like even if you go to a Whole Foods and you're going and you're getting like the packaged meals that you think look healthy, like talk to me about that.
Oh my gosh, it's been really sad to actually watch the degradation of Whole Foods. It used to be a great place to go, but you have to be very mindful what you purchase there. I personally wouldn't buy any of the prepared foods anymore. And actually, Whole Foods employees have told me not to because I am there regularly. I'm there 5 to 6 days a week. I know the staff very well at the Whole Foods that I shop at because they see
Yeah.
me every morning. And as it's been changed since 2020. They no longer prepare their food on site. They used to prepare the food on site at every individual Whole Foods for their salad bars and for the prepared sections. Now it's all happening in cafeterias and being shipped in. All those prepared salads are just being cut from a bag. It's old processed food. Most of those eggs, definitely avoid breakfast because no one's back there cracking opening an egg and scrambling it for you. So it's a pre-processed egg mixture that has citric acid and other chemicals in it in order for it to stay shelf stable longer. And then they just scramble it in a Teflon pan with canola oil. So with this in mind, I highly suggest whenever you go out for breakfast, never order scrambled eggs because no one's cracking eggs and scrambling it for you at a restaurant. And I've worked in restaurants, and this is just the reality. They are using a pre-packaged egg mixture. You can Google it and see a photo online. The only way you're going to get an egg if you go to a restaurant is if you ask for sunny side up, hard boiled, poached, something that requires it to actually look like an egg. Otherwise, you're getting this processed mixture. And that's simply because, people are pressed for time and people don't want to pay what food really costs. Yeah. So they have to cut corners in order to get you the product that you want in the time that you want with the budget that you want.
Yeah. And so even when we're going out to breakfast or brunch and we think we're doing something really great and getting an omelet,
don't get the omelet.
Don't get the omelet. Oh my
Never
gosh.
get the omelet. Get the omelet at home when you are going to crack open the eggs. I'm telling you, it has to be sunny side up, over easy, poached, hard boiled. That's the only way you're going to get an egg. Now, if you travel through Europe, different places where you go, even in Mexico, they'll crack the eggs.
Yeah.
You have to be very mindful of where you're going. Even if your breakfast place says it's farm to table or this, that, and the other, it's probably not doing that for the omelets.
That is such a great point. And I just brought that up because I know myself, I sometimes get caught in that trap of like, oh, well, it's Whole Foods, so it's got to be good. And, the more I learn and the more that I do deeper dives into nutrition, I feel like Yeah, it's not good. It's not.
To be mindful everywhere you go. And I think you also need to feel into it because
Yeah.
what's right for you isn't right for me and vice versa. So, where you are with your partner or your kids, what's healthy for you is going to be different for them. So you need to read labels. You really can't trust any place you go yet. I think things are going to really evolve in the next 10 years, but you just need to double check, trust your gut, trust how you feel, and then ultimately surrender. And then know that you'll always be able to control and eat a healthy meal when you're at home and when you're
Yeah.
choosing the ingredients. And, part of the fun when you go out and when you travel is to try new things. So you have to find a balance between controlling the quality that you're getting and just living in the moment.
Right. So I love that you brought up, what's good for you might not be good for someone else. So let's just touch on that for a second, because I feel like, we are inundated on social media with what we should or shouldn't be eating constantly. I mean, what supplements we should be taking, what drink mixes we should be taking. Like, I mean, I don't know how anyone can fit all of this in a day when you really look at what it is that we're supposed to be fueling our body with. But I think it's interesting because I'm gluten free and have been for a long time. I'm also dairy free, but I dabble in dairy every now and then, and I'm okay and tolerate it. I was like strict dairy free for a while, but like I have oat milk and or almond milk and oat milk, and I seem to tolerate it well. And then I was just literally watching something on social media where it was like, no oats ever. Like you shouldn't have oat anything. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I was doing so good having oat milk. And because they were saying oats are inflammatory and you shouldn't eat them. So let's talk a little bit about the what is good for you, works for me, because, I'm gluten free. I don't expect that anyone else needs to be gluten free unless it's, what works for them. But at what point, does that end, or how do we navigate this like very crazy environment of don't eat this, don't eat that. You must have, 120 grams of protein a day. You must do this. You must like, there's so many like shoulds and don'ts that it drives you crazy. How do we navigate that landscape?
Yeah, I think people need to stop turning to modern science and modern nutrition for the answers. So
Okay.
eat
Love
when
that.
you're hungry. Don't eat when you're not hungry. You know what a balanced plate looks like. When there's days that you're craving more protein than vegetables. Like you got to learn to listen to your intuition and know what's right for you. And at any time that you're weighing your food or measuring macros or concerned about grams of protein, then you've lost what nutrition really is. Because at no time does that need to be controlled in that way. And you have to remember, this is all new. Weighing grams, calories, this is modern science. This isn't holistic nutrition. This
Yeah.
isn't the way people have been eating for centuries and centuries and centuries. So I think when you start to get overwhelmed with food and nutrition, when you get to a place where you don't even know what to eat, that's when you literally turn off social media. You
Yeah.
don't check any of it, or you have to change your algorithm, what you're seeing, or you need to turn off the television for a while and you need to go for a walk. It happens to everybody. It happens,
Yeah.
and it's just the noise, and you got to step away from the noise so you can hear yourself again.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that advice. I love that advice. It's really great. If you're weighing or counting, time to shut it down.
Well, it's modern science. It's not true nutrition.
Yeah.
It's working for some people. There's always a time and a place for everything, but I don't think that's actually going to set anyone up for success in living their life in a healthy way, because it's going to create too many rules and it's going to really make it hard for you to have a social life. To
Yeah.
connect with others, because you're going to be so tied to your scale or to counting or to control that you're going to miss out on being in the moment with people.
Yeah. So true. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about farm to table cooking and sort
Yeah.
of what that looks like. How do we do it? are we truly sourcing from a farm? If so, how do we find them? Like, if you could just give us a little bit insight into like how to approach that lifestyle for those that might be willing and wanting to make a change in how they cook at home, but don't know where to start.
Absolutely. So I'm in Laguna Beach, California, my hometown. So I have a few different options. So I go to the farmer's market like about every other Saturday. I squeeze it in when I can. And I like going to the farmer's market simply for fruit because that's usually where I can count on the fact that I can get fruit without wax on it. And that's really important to me. So I can get an apple and I can bite into the apple and there isn't that layer of wax that's, building up in my system over time. You just can't get that at the grocery stores anymore. And you can actually talk to the people that have usually picked the fruit or it is their farm, and you can double check to see if there's pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, what quality of the fruit that they are choosing. So are they using an heirloom type of plant? Are they using a GMO plant? You can ask questions, and most of the time people are happily advertising that information. And then you can also start to approach getting your vegetables there or your protein there or your eggs in a variety of different things. And you can take your time and do a few loops so you can make sure that you're buying kind of what's in season just by seeing what everybody else is growing. And also according to how much money you're willing to spend. And then some other options here in Southern California, there are two small farms. One in particular that I really like called the Ecology Center. It's where I also guest chef occasionally, and it's a 28-acre regenerative farm. So you can go to their farm shop and they're pulling produce that's from their farm, but they're also pulling produce that are from some other farms in the San Diego and Orange County area, because the reality is a farm can only produce so much. So you're always going to be, all these places are always going to be pulling from a few different locations. Otherwise, there's going to be times where they have empty shelves.
Right.
So it's also understanding that there's no perfect way. So sometimes I have clients that ask me, I want a personal chef that pulls everything from the Ecology Center. Well, that's great. But then, there might be days where all you're going to get is a tomato salad because that's all that's available. And so you have to understand that going that route it's going to create more constrictions if you're cool with that. Just like ordering from a CSA farm box, which you can now go online and Google CSA farm box near me or put in your county name or your city name. And you can find a box that can be delivered to your home once a week with local produce that's in season from a farm. And that's really fun to do if you're willing to just be flexible and open-minded and use it as a tool to see how much better freshly picked food tastes, see how that makes you feel, but then also learn what grows in season in your area. That's really cool to learn about.
Yeah, it is really cool. Do you know what CSA stands for?
I don't actually.
Okay, no, I just was curious. I'm like, I don't know. I haven't ever heard of CSA Farm Box, but I am going to look into that because I think that sounds like a great option to sort of play around with and see what kind of foods, if the food is fresh and it's showing up at your house. The nice thing is we do have Google now to kind of help us learn how to prepare it possibly. So that's awesome. That's a great recommendation.
Yeah, CSA, I looked it up. It means community supported agriculture.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. That's great. So, okay, help me out with if there was one or two meals, if, we have a lot of busy moms that are listeners, many women on the go, working moms, people that, again, just, I feel like everyone that I talk to, the biggest struggle, they're just everyone's so frustrated with dinner. It's what am I making for dinner? Right. And I think the struggle is even harder now because everyone knows that we should be doing better and we should be cooking healthier. So what are one or two meals or something that you suggest, you talked about, the traditional preparation? It's something that you could, easily serve and isn't going to take hours and hours of their time.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things that I cook for myself and for my personal chef clients are bone in, skin on chicken thighs. Because if
Okay.
you look at the chicken, the dark meat is going to have the biggest transfer of energy for you. So whenever you look at an animal, you want to look at the part of the animal that worked the hardest. So the legs, the thighs, the part of the animal that was carrying it, that was allowing it to walk around, run around. The dark meat is where the energy is. If you look at the chicken breast, the white meat, and you think about your breasts, they're not doing that much to carry and support you in life, right? So your
Right.
arms, your wings, your legs, your thighs, that's where you're exerting the most energy. So the same thing's going to come from the animal. And when we think about our meals, we want them to be delicious and flavorful and fun to and make us feel good. But we're looking at it for a transfer of energy at the end of the day. It's really about what am I going to get from this that's going to fuel me to continue. So I love buying bone in, skin on chicken thighs because when you include the skin and you include the bone, you're going to get more nutritional density. You're going to eat less. When you get the fat is brain food and the fat is satiation. So you're going to end up eating less because you'll be satisfied. And I just pat dry those chicken thighs really well. I do the old shake and bake method where I toss it with tons of spice. I have my own line of organic spice blends called Starseed Kitchen. So I tend to use those, but you can use whatever organic blend that you can find in your area, or you can visit my website. And you always want to look for something that has no sugar. And then I bake them at 400 degrees for about 35 minutes. And at the same time, you can do another pan with your roasted grounding vegetables like parsnips, carrots, potatoes, kabocha squash, butternut squash, whatever is like super grounding, like a healthy starch. And then while that's all in the oven, that's when I blanch the green vegetable. So I just boil water. I add a little salt because the salt is going to cut the bitterness of the green and it's also going to keep it vibrant green. And I just blanch green chard, broccolini, broccoli, kale, whatever green or vegetable I want to steam or blanch is in season. You just throw it in, wait a few seconds, pour it out. And now I have a balance. I have some greens, I have a healthy starch, I have my protein, and I always make double or triple what I need. So that way I'm now stocked for the week. So when I come home and I'm starving, the food's already in there and I can just grab it and heat it. And you always want to heat your food in the oven or on the stove because you don't want to put the frequency coming from the microwave into your food. All that will be revealed to you, I think, in the next 10 years. But there's nothing coming from the microwave that's good for your body. It's a dangerous frequency. And I highly suggest don't use it for your food or your water. You deserve better. And if you just cut that from your life alone, I think you'll start to physically feel better.
Yeah. I know that is something that I have thought about so much over the years because it's just one of those things that, like when you put it in and it just heats up so fast and then it's hot, something's not right. I mean, it can't be. I mean, if we shouldn't be drinking water out of plastic bottles, we certainly shouldn't be heating our food up with the microwave. But again, I mean, we're all doing it, so it makes it feel like, oh well, I'll do it. And I try not to, but I do it sometimes because the oven just takes so long to heat up.
It doesn't. The oven will heat up in 15 minutes. And if you
Yeah.
have a convection setting and you press that button, it'll heat up even faster. But the oven heats up fast. And if you can give it 15 minutes, you can
Yeah.
even put your food in there before the oven's fully hot. There's no rule that says you have to wait till it's hot to put your food in.
Right.
But the frequency that's coming from the microwave is dangerous. And I've gone over 20 years without using a microwave. So it's totally
Wow.
doable.
Good for
And
you. That's
yeah, and
amazing.
I haven't been a chef for 20 years. I've technically only been a chef for 9. So
Yeah.
it's totally possible. But one thing to keep in mind when you're approaching improving your diet, your health, your well-being, is anything that emits a frequency is going to be affecting how you feel. And that can affect how hungry you are, how sensitive you are, how irritated you are, how easygoing you are. And everything in your kitchen is really plugged in these days. So you have a refrigerator, you have a dishwasher, you have an oven and a stove, you have a microwave, you have, anything that you have on the counter. When it's plugged in, it's emitting a frequency, and that electromagnetic field builds up in your kitchen. So it's really great to always open a window while you're cooking and let some fresh air in so that electromagnetic smog goes out. So if you do decide to not use any equipment, unplug your blender when you're not using it, unplug your juicer when you're not using it. And if you aren't going to be using your microwave, you want to unplug the microwave because it's plugged in. You can unplug it. I've done it many times. I do it even in certain hotel rooms that I'm in, just so
Yeah.
that frequency isn't hitting my body.
Yeah. No, that's great advice that I'm sure none of us really think about on a daily basis, right? Of all the appliances that are plugged in. Let's talk about, you mentioned when we were talking about food, grounding
Yeah.
foods, and you mentioned like the grounding vegetables. Tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah. So if we look at the way food grows, it'll give us insight on how it's going to make us feel. And right, we're choosing our food because we want to feel a certain way. So when it's summertime, we like to feel really light and skinny, right? So
Yes.
we eat a lot of food that's in season, that's filled with water, that's going to make us feel a little lighter, like cucumbers and watermelon. So if I think about foods that's going to make me feel really grounded and homey and calm and rooted at the end of the day, I'm going to look at the farm, like the imaginary farm in my head, and I'm going to see the soil on the ground, and I'm going to imagine everything that grows into the soil, that grows into the ground. So carrots, beets, rutabagas, parsnips, potatoes, anything that goes deep into the ground, that would be a root vegetable or a rooted vegetable.
Right. And I guess that's why they call them like comfort foods in a way, right? Like
Yeah.
potatoes and, they're like hearty and comforting in a way.
Absolutely. And that's exactly how they make you feel. And then when you think about some of the spring and summer vegetables, they often tend to be growing towards the sun. So if we think of green beans and string beans, they're on a vine kind of growing up in that direction. We think of the fruit of the summer, a lot of it's stone fruit. So it's
Yeah.
peaches and nectarines and plums. They're up in trees growing towards the sun. So it's really interesting. Nature will always kind of show us how it's going to serve us. And I love those books and those images that help us understand, why nuts are shaped a certain way. They're supporting, that organ or that body part. There's a lot of imagery involved with our food, and it's really fascinating. It's a fun thing to play with and to learn about.
Yeah. I just love your perspective on food because it really takes us back to, a time when, like you said, tradition and people were eating for celebrations and just eating good, clean food from the farm to the table in a very different time. And I think we've gotten so far from there. But I love the perspective of when you really are thinking about food, not just to enjoy it when we eat, but when you really think about nourishing your body, right? And that like what you're putting in is affecting us on a cellular level and nourishing us in that way, and that everything can affect us. It really makes you shift your mindset into like what it is that you're putting in your mouth. And you have such a beautiful perspective on food. So I really love that. So tell us a little bit about Starseed Kitchen. I know you mentioned that you have a line of spices, but what prompted you to start Starseed Kitchen? What is it? Give us more information about that.
Yeah, so Starseed Kitchen really started as my website where I share all the meal prep recipes that I do for my personal chef clients, just because I really want to empower people to cook healthy meals at home. And so I wanted to share exactly what I was doing for other people. And part of that was my spice blends that I use for my clients, because they're also what I use for myself. Most of these blends I've been making for over 20 years, just buying my own organic spices, using high quality sea salt, making sure there's no sugar, there's no anti-caking agents, there's no MSG, there's no junk when I can make it myself. And my clients liked all these spice blends that I was using on their proteins and their vegetables and their soups and stews that they wanted to be able to share it with other people. So that's why I started selling my spice blends. I only share two of the blends right now. One's called 11 Magic Herbs and Spices, and the other is called Adobo, which is packed full of anti-inflammatory turmeric. And those are like really my key staples myself. So that's what I use literally every week on my proteins, on my fishes, when I make chili, when I roast vegetables. It's the real deal. And it's what I use for my clients too. And it's just to help people have flavorful meals in a really easy way. So salt and pepper is great, but sometimes you need a little more oomph and you deserve to have a little more flavor in your food, and you don't need to add, tons of oil or have to buy 50 million jars of spices that you aren't going to use again. And so I really
Yeah.
wanted to make something that was approachable for someone that wants to cook their own meals, but are maybe a little overwhelmed in how to approach it. So this really just simplifies it for them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the idea of a spice blend because I have been dabbling a little bit more in spice blends myself, and I feel like it makes the meal so much better. And when I look at my spice rack and I'm cooking and I'm like, oh, should I pick this one and this one? Like I feel like I'm a little bit more challenged in that way. And when it's a blend and you're going to put it on and it's going to come out and it's going to taste fantastic, it makes it so much easier. And it really does it's so simple. Like I roast my vegetables with a little bit of, spices on them. And it's just so good and so clean and delicious and simple.
Yeah.
So I think adding like a very high quality, good spice blend can make so many things really delicious.
And it's important for people to remember that spices are superfoods. So spices and herbs are concentrated forms of it in real life. So if we take a look at most of these spices and herbs, they've been dried and ground. And so they're just concentrated. So you're actually getting more bang for your buck. So that's why it's really important that you buy organic or look for labels that say like non-irradiated, non-GMO, no added colors, no citric acid, no MSG. You still have to read the labels of your spices because everywhere you go, ingredients are being added in order to make things more shelf stable so they can have a longer shelf life so the company can make their money, which is totally
Yeah.
fair, but it's ultimately not going to serve you. And all these things that we're talking about today, like they're such little things, but it all adds up. And that's when people have those experiences where they wake up one morning and they don't feel good. They
Yeah.
wake up one morning and something's wrong. It's all been building, and that you've just finally hit the tipping point. And I don't want anyone to get there. So if you just make small little edits once a week, once a month, like allow those edits, or I like to call them upgrades, like just make little upgrades. Like if you're buying generic milk, maybe next time you go, you try an organic one. And then
Yeah.
maybe in the future, you try raw or you try A2 or, you switch to something else. If that's not making you feel good, just like little edits and upgrades over time are really going to serve you and support you.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic advice. Tell us a little bit about, I know you also host a podcast, High Vibration Living. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that too.
Well, like we're talking about today, I love learning about all the different things that are going to make me feel good. So things that are going to support my physical body, my emotional body, my mental body, my spiritual body. I still like to learn about food. So like I want to learn more about why I should be drinking A2 milk, why I should be buying 100% grass-fed, grass-finished from certain farms, understanding the way certain vegetables grow and how that's going to make me feel, talking to different practitioners about healing with numbers or, the fascia system and how we can use that to, make ourselves feel better. All those different things that come up, crystals in the
Yeah.
kitchen. Like
Yeah.
I just love anything that's in that field. And I wanted to share those type of conversations with others because I believe once you get your food right, like once we nail your foundation of food that's right for you, then all these other things that we pull in to our life, I think it's like dessert. Like it can really it can really set in and serve us and support us. But you can't avoid poor nutrition, just like you can't avoid your feelings. Like someday you're going to have to face what you're feeling, and someday you're going to have to face your diet choices, and you're
Yeah.
going to have to make changes.
So true. So true. I love that. I love your physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental outlook and aspect of looking at nutrition and looking at diet. I love that you have a podcast about it. I'm going to absolutely tune in and listen because that is right up my alley about like what we're all here to be whole humans, right? And we have to really look at every aspect of ourselves and learn about every aspect of ourselves in order to grow and develop and just become more joyful human beings. So thank you for serving and supporting us in that way. I've absolutely loved having you on the podcast. Tell my listeners where they can find you.
Oh, thank you. Well, you can always find me on Instagram and Facebook at Whitney Aronoff or Starseed Kitchen. And then you can visit starseedkitchen.com if you want to see my recipes or shop Starseed Kitchen spices. And if you're out here on the West Coast, you can always go to the famous Erewhon. They have 10 locations in Los Angeles, and you can pick up a jar of one of my spices. And then the podcast, the High Vibration Living podcast, is Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you're tuning into this one.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope someday we'll get an Erewhon out here on the East Coast. I don't know, might be a long time, but I've heard so much about that and just never been.
I hope it gets everywhere too, because it supports us all that likes to travel and continue to eat healthy.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Whitney. It was wonderful to have you here. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm going to be cooking some chicken thighs this week. I know that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening. We really enjoyed having you once again on Suburban Warrior, and we will be back next week with another amazing Suburban Warrior story. Be sure to check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and we'll talk to you next week.